At a luxury tractor showroom, a quiet, weathered old black farmer steps inside, his boots dusty, his presence barely noticed. The staff glance over, smirking, certain he doesn't belong. But when they mock him and try to push him out, he remains calm, steady, unshaken. Then the CEO walks in and heads straight for the man they just humiliated. What happens next will change the way they see respect forever. Hello, friends. If you're new here, then don't forget to hit subscribe button. And if you like, then hit the like button. Also, and don't forget to tell me in the comments where you're from watching this video. The late summer sun was beginning to pull its weight over the dry hills of Cedar Hill, Texas. Dust clung stubbornly to the edges of the cracked road, and the air smelled faintly of sun-baked soil and aging wood. Otis Langford sat on the edge of his porch, one boot unlaced, both hands wrapped around a tin mug of lukewarm coffee that had long since lost its flavor. The years had turned his skin tough like bark, dark and lined from decades in the fields. Soil under his nails, calluses in the center of each palm, his frame lean from honest labor. He was a farmer, always had been, from the first time his daddy handed him a hoe at 11 to now, nearly 7 decades later. He'd known the land better than most men knew their wives, and though time had slowed him, it had not dulled the pride in his work. The phone rang twice inside the house. Otis didn't rush. He didn't rush for much these days. But when he picked up and heard his son's voice, calm, low, serious, he sat up straighter. "Daddy," Braxton began, and that alone said something. Braxton Langford didn't call him Daddy anymore, not unless something was weighing heavy. "I need a favor." Something delicate. Otis didn't speak right away. He let the silence pull more from his son than words could. "There have been complaints," Braxton continued, "from the main showroom, Royal Harvest, Dallas. Word is, some of the staff are treating customers different. Like if you're not wearing a Rolex or showing a business card, you don't get service. Especially if you're black. Especially if you don't look the part." Otis's eyes narrowed slightly, not from surprise, but from recognition. That same weight, that same judgment. He'd carried it on his shoulders his whole life. In diners, in banks, in feed stores, where the man behind the counter smiled differently once he realized Otis wasn't just passing through. "I need you to go there," Braxton said, voice tightening. "As you are, don't give your name. Don't say anything about me. Just walking like a man looking for a machine." Otis set the mug down slowly. The idea didn't sit easy. It wasn't a task. It was a damn feeling. He'd grown tired of having to prove his worth just to be seen. But there was something deeper here, a test of the house his son had built. And if there was rot under the marble floors, it was better to dig it out than pretend it wasn't there. "All right," Otis said simply. That was how he agreed to things with weight, not noise. He didn't own a suit, never needed one. So he wore what he always wore when heading into town. Faded jeans, a collar-work shirt stained with motor oil near the hem, and an old trucker's cap that barely held shape. He polished his boots, because Mama always said a man's boots speak before he does. But the dust was already creeping back in before he reached the bus station. No one at the terminal looked twice. But Otis noticed something. The way folks shifted when he sat, the way a mother subtly guided her child to the next bench over. Same old song. As the city skyline loomed closer, Otis adjusted his collar and stared out the window, his reflection faint in the glass. There was no anger in his face, only a patient kind of weariness. He wasn't going there to pick a fight. He was going to listen, to observe. But deep inside, something old and heavy stirred. He had a feeling this wouldn't be just another visit. It would be a reckoning. The Royal Harvest Texas Central showroom sat like a glass palace on the edge of the city, its silver facade gleaming under the afternoon sun. Cold and perfect, like a place built to keep certain people out. Otis stepped off the bus, his boots meeting the sidewalk with a soft crunch of dust. He adjusted his cap against the bright light, then made his way across the broad, polished walkway toward the entrance. No other customers walking in. Just a valet wiping down the chrome of a corporate pickup, and a receptionist behind the glass, eyeing him like she'd seen a smudge appear on an otherwise pristine window. The moment he pushed open the door, a gust of cold, manufactured air met his skin. The floor was tile, marble, or something meant to look like it, and it shone like someone had waxed it 5 minutes ago. Overhead spotlights cast beams across massive pieces of machinery. Tractors with cabin interiors like cockpits, LED dash systems, touchscreen navigation, climate control. Machines built for scale, not soil. This wasn't a farmer's store. It was a showroom for agriculture empires. He took 3 steps inside before someone looked up. A young woman at the front desk, blonde, manicured, the type who probably never stood near a plow in her life, glanced over her monitor. Her gaze slid from his boots to the tear in the elbow of his shirt. She didn't smile, didn't say hello, just tapped something on her keyboard and looked away again. The door shut behind him with a crisp click, a mechanical exhale that sounded a little too final. Otis stood still a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the sterile brightness. The space was silent, except for the faint hum of air conditioning and the muffled steps of dress, shoes, moving somewhere beyond the displays. He walked in slow, steady strides, past the machines he knew by name but in newer, shinier forms. Iron Trek, Steelmaster, Terraforce. The names had changed, gotten flashier, but the bones of the work were the same. He ran his fingers along the cold edge of a steel axle, his hand dwarfing the chrome logo. Behind him, whispers. Does he even know where he is? A male voice said low, but not low enough. Probably wandered in from the parking lot. Otis kept walking. He didn't flinch, didn't glance over. It wasn't the first time he'd been looked at like background noise. The young receptionist reappeared at the far end of the showroom with someone else in tow. Tall, mid-40s, crisp black suit, gold pen in his chest pocket, tablet in hand. He walked like he owned the room, or expected to, soon. His hair was slicked back tight. His name tag gleamed. Griffin Steele, showroom manager. Griffin didn't smile as he approached, just slowed to a calculated stop, lips pressing into something almost but not quite polite. You lost, sir? He asked, voice smooth as lacquered wood. Looking for the restroom, perhaps? Otis met his eyes, calm, clear, unshaken. No, he replied. I came to see the new tractors, the latest series. Griffin's lips curled into a controlled smirk. Ah, I see. His eyes flicked again to Otis's boots, then back up. The Iron Trek 6000 line. That's our flagship, used primarily by commercial partners with large-scale acreage. We don't usually show those to private visitors. But if you're just here to browse, we do have a few older models in the back. Easier on the wallet. Otis didn't respond. He simply looked at the man, long and unblinking, as if studying something behind his eyes. Griffin shifted slightly, uncomfortable with the silence, then continued. And frankly, for operations under 50 acres, which I assume is your situation, something more basic might be more appropriate, more practical. We're happy to accommodate all budgets, of course. We even accept debit cards. He chuckled once, low. There it was. Not just condescension, but the kind laced with something uglier, something that said, you don't belong here. Not like this. Otis's gaze remained fixed, not angry, just present. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Griffin's smirk faltered. The air between them was still, sharp with something unsaid, but unmistakably clear. Otis nodded once. Then I'll take a look on my own, he said, and turned toward the flagship row without waiting for permission. Otis moved slowly, his steps measured, deliberate. The weight of years and silence carried in his spine. He stopped in front of the Iron Trek 6000 Royal Harvest most advanced model. Its sleek graphite frame glowed under the soft white showroom lights. It looked less like a machine and more like something you'd expect to find in a military hangar, built to dominate land, to plow earth like it owed you something. Otis didn't touch it, not yet. He leaned in slightly, eyes scanning the console. Digital control panel, dual axis terrain mapping, climate control cabin, and a torque range he could tell without reading was far more than needed for anything less than 800 acres. Still, he admired it, not with greed, but with the quiet reverence of a man who knew what machines like this meant to the soil and the sweat it replaced. Behind him, footsteps, quicker this time. He didn't turn. Griffin's voice came sharper now, louder than before, echoing across the showroom with the confidence of someone who believed the room always belonged to him. Sir, he called, the word thick with sarcasm. Just so we're clear, This model doesn't offer weekly payment plans. This isn't a rental lot. You follow. Otis said nothing. His gaze lingered on a data readout labeled Yield Optimization AI, and for a split second he seemed to smile, not because it impressed him, but because he remembered trying to hit those yields with nothing more than instinct, prayer, and his father's broken-down plow. Griffin closed the distance, now standing close enough that Otis could feel the stale heat of the man's breath. He chuckled, the kind of laugh that never reached the eyes. "These machines are meant for real operations," he said, stepping Otis aside. "Big-time clients, corporate acreage, not weekend growers or retirees playing farmer." Otis glanced sideways, but didn't speak. He'd seen men like this before, young, polished, hollow. "You know," Griffin continued, voice dipping into mock sympathy. "I get it. Folks wander in, see the lights, think they're at some kind of tech expo. Hell, maybe you thought this was a museum. But this," he gestured grandly to machines around them, "this is the future of industrial agriculture, not a playground for backyard gardeners with dirt under their nails." Otis remained still. His silence had weight like stone, but Griffin mistook it for weakness. "And don't get me wrong," he went on, louder now, attracting the attention of two other employees nearby. "I'm not trying to offend you, but these machines require training, software fluency, logistics planning. It's not just pull a lever and go anymore. That might be a little out of reach for some folks, especially folks who, let's be honest, probably didn't finish high school." Otis turned then, slow and measured. His face held no anger, only a quiet, level stare. It was a kind of look that came from a lifetime of being talked down to, from choosing dignity over retaliation. Griffin took that as a challenge. "You have anything to say?" he asked, tone rising with artificial boldness. "Or do I need to call someone to escort you out before you scuff the display glass?" Otis didn't break eye contact. "I was just looking," he said. "Yeah, and I was just being patient," Griffin snapped back. "But I've got actual clients walking in any minute, and I don't have time to babysit someone who walked off a tractor thinking they'd window shop their way through six-figure machines." Then, without warning, Griffin stepped closer and pressed the heel of his hand into Otis's shoulder, subtle, but firm enough to shove him back an inch. "This ain't a field trip, old man. Don't waste our time." It was small, quick, but Otis felt the insult in the touch more than the words. His hand tightened slightly at his side, not from fear, but from restraint. The room had gone quiet. Even the receptionist looked up, her mouth slightly open. Then came the laugh. A younger sales associate, maybe mid-20s, standing by the corner desk, barked out a laugh that bounced off the polished floors. "Maybe he thought this was a tractor museum," he said, grinning wide. "Y'all see him staring at the panel, like it was in a foreign language?" A few chuckles followed. Not all loud, not all from cruelty, some from cowardice. Otis looked around slowly. The floor beneath him didn't shine anymore. It just felt cold. His fingers flexed once, then relaxed. His heartbeat steady. He'd lived through worse. He'd stood in rooms where his worth was less than nothing. But this was his son's house, and the rot inside it stank. He turned back toward the machine, placed one hand gently on the fender, and spoke. Low but clear. "This machine here," he said, "was designed to take 7% less soil compaction with dual-width tires. Doesn't matter how shiny it is if your operator don't understand the weight." Griffin blinked just once, but Otis was already walking away. And this time, the room watched him, silent, uncomfortable, suddenly unsure of who they'd just tried to shove out the door. Griffin's hand hovered near the tablet clipped to his hip, fingers already dancing toward the security assistance tab with that kind of smug confidence that only comes when a man believes he has absolute control over the ground he stands on. His voice slid back into that sales pitch cadence, smooth, soulless, as he turned slightly toward the receptionist across the floor. "I think it's time someone kindly escorted our guest out before this turns into a scene," he said, loud enough for the others to hear. His eyes never left Otis. But before the order could even leave his lips, the showroom doors whispered open behind them. No announcement, no fanfare, just a hush of motion, like a blade slicing through fabric. Heads turned. Every glance followed the man who entered. Tall, sharp, suited in slate gray, shoulders square like steel plates beneath tailored wool. His steps made no sound on the polished floor, but his presence hit like a siren. Braxton Langford didn't say a word. Not at first. He walked past the receptionist, past the frozen staff, past Griffin, who had just begun to squint in recognition, and stopped directly in front of Otis. And then, without hesitation, he pulled the old man into an embrace. It wasn't staged. It wasn't rehearsed. It was the kind of hug that made silence crack. Otis stood still at first, stiff in his son's arms, his jaw clenched, unsure if this was meant to fix what couldn't be. But Braxton held on, tight, not with pity, with reverence. When he finally pulled back, he placed one steady hand on his father's shoulder and turned toward the room. His voice, when it came, was calm, clear, sharp enough to silence the air. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said, eyes locked on Griffin. "I'm sorry you had to see this with your own eyes." Griffin's expression twisted. It wasn't just confusion now. It was panic, poorly disguised behind a corporate smile. "Mr. Langford, I didn't realize. He never introduced himself. Braxton cut him off with a breath. "You didn't need him to," he said. "You just needed to see him. And you failed." There it was. Every employee in the room locked in place, suddenly too aware of the quiet, of the weight in Braxton's tone. "This man," Braxton continued, "built our legacy with bare hands and sunburned skin. While I was reading about torque ratios and soil calibration, he was living them. Before there was an office or a showroom or a logo, he was in the dirt, turning it over, planting crops that wouldn't grow unless he begged the rain. He's the reason I ever dreamed of this company in the first place." He looked around, eyes meeting each face, landing finally on Griffin. "You tried to push him out, belittled him, touched him like he was a burden, like he didn't belong." Braxton's voice dropped an octave, quieter now, sharper than ever. "Let me be clear. If he doesn't belong here, then none of us do." Otis didn't move, his face unreadable, but his eyes flicked just once toward Griffin. And now, Griffin looked smaller than he ever had before, not because he'd been yelled at, but because he'd been seen. Seen for what he truly was. Braxton turned back to his father. His tone softened. "You don't have to say anything," he said. "You already taught them more by walking than I ever could by speaking." Otis gave the faintest nod, not in pride, not in triumph, but in quiet confirmation of a truth that had never needed proving. The room was silent. No one looked at the iron trek anymore. The silence that followed Braxton's words hung in the air like thick dust in sunlight, visible, choking, undeniable. For a long moment, no one moved. Griffin's eyes darted from face to face, as if searching for someone to rescue him from the weight of his own failure. But there was no rescue, just stillness. And Braxton's voice. "You're done," he said, calm as ever, effective immediately. Griffin's face collapsed. "Sir, if I'd known who he was." "That's the problem," Braxton interrupted. "You should have to know who someone is to treat them like they matter." Griffin opened his mouth, but the words never formed. Braxton turned his back on him, without ceremony, without anger, just the finality of a door that would not be reopened. His gaze swept to the young salesman near the counter, the one who had laughed loud and careless just minutes earlier. The young man shrank slightly under the weight of what he knew was coming. Braxton didn't raise his voice. "Every time you laugh at a man who walks in with dirt on his boots," he said, "you lose one who might have fed your whole family for a year." The words hit harder than a shout. Otis stood a few feet away, unmoved. He hadn't spoken since the embrace. He didn't need to. His presence, silent, dignified, said everything that mattered. He didn't want apologies. Not the hollow kind that come after the fact. He wasn't here for vengeance either. He'd lived long enough to know. Arrogance often punishes itself. A woman from a reception desk approached slowly, hands clasped in front of her. Her voice trembled when she spoke. I saw how he treated you. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't say anything." She paused, swallowing hard. I was afraid. Otis looked at her, not with judgment, but with the quiet steadiness of a man who had seen too much to hate easily. He placed one heavy hand on her shoulder. The skin of his palm darkened by sun, hardened by years. "Next time," he said softly, "be the first one to stand up. You might not get another." She nodded, eyes glassy. Behind them, the glass showroom gleamed on, pristine and hollow as ever. But the air had changed. Something unspoken had been shaken loose. And it wasn't just about machines anymore. Otis turned to leave, his steps as steady as when he'd first entered, but the weight on his shoulders somehow lighter. Braxton walked beside him, silent now, his hands folded in front of him, like a boy walking next to a preacher. At the door, Otis paused. The sun outside was brighter than before. Or maybe it just felt that way. The light spilled through the showroom glass, catching the edges of his boots. The same boots that had been laughed at, ignored, scorned. He turned just slightly and glanced over his shoulder at the room behind him. People stood still. Some avoided his eyes. Others met his gaze with something like shame, or maybe respect. His voice came low, thoughtful. "Not every shiny thing is built right," he said. "And not every man in dirty boots is lost." Braxton nodded, as if hearing something he already knew, but had forgotten in the noise. Otis stepped forward again. Just before crossing the threshold, he added, almost to himself, but loud enough to be heard, "A machine's only as good as the hands that build it, and a company's only as strong as the heart it remembers." As they walked into the sunlight, the camera of the moment pulled back, if there had been one, to show the trail Otis left behind. Not footsteps, not fanfare, just a faint smudge of dust where his boots had pressed against the polished floor. A mark that no one rushed to clean. A mark that stayed. And maybe, just maybe, it would remind them all where they came from and who had walked through before them.